Ecchi.
With the news that adult games will now be heading to Steam in one form or another, I believe it'd be good to cover the general expectations of releases on the platform. So in this video, I'll be highlighting some of the general expectations for adult games on Steam, both from the players and from the developers and publishers. In the past, adult games that have made it to Steam were stripped of adult content that existed in the titles. To work around Steam's previous policies regarding adult content on the service, publishers and developers would create patches hosted off-site to reintegrate the adult content into a title. Whilst this worked, some publishers took this as an opportunity to charge for the adult content whilst reducing the price of the all-ages editions sold on Steam. Understandably, this frustrated some customers as games initially sold for their sexual appeal were sterilised and turned into games that didn't represent the original product. For games that didn't focus on sexual aspects, such as the Necropara series, it was somewhat acceptable to a certain degree to have patches be paid downloadable content. This introduced pricing issues regarding the adult content, however, as the outlets outside of Steam often sold patches with only one currency option available, meaning players in specific regions were unfairly charged depending on the currency's value against the US dollar. For example, the 18+ DLC patch for Necropara Volume 1 on the Dempersoft website is $9.99. If I were to purchase Necropara Volume 1 on Steam in the United Kingdom, I would be charged £6.99, and at the time of this video, the patch would cost me £7.60, as opposed to an identical price to the game in my Steam store region, meaning I'm having to pay more than I should for my region for the adult content. One real-world example of this would be from Reddit user Raging Alien, who said in Sekai Project's Chris Ling's Ask Me Anything, "One of the main reasons I don't buy patches from Dempersoft, and in some cases don't buy the game at all, is the fact that I have to pay for the patch using dollars. Necropara, which goes for 20 in my local currency, costs $10 for the patch, which goes for approximately 35 in my local currency." Situations like this can be avoided if publishers exclusively host DLC on Steam, as then those with major differences in their region's currency can pay accordingly in their own currency, as opposed to being overcharged through different outlets. Paid adult DLC is another aspect to discuss though, as quite a few players disagree with charging for adult content in a game, and would much prefer all adult content be sold as free DLC. Though there are arguments against this, as it would increase the price for those solely interested in the all-ages versions of such games. Reddit user Monblue said this in reference to a post about Steam allowing uncensored visual novels and eroge on the platform. "I hope that doesn't mean that we don't get all-ages versions of visual novels anymore. Not to offend anyone here, but I actually liked that Steam was a good place to get visual novels without hentai content. It will be significantly harder to get ero-free visual novels now, so I'm not too happy about that even if I'm in the minority here. Which is a fair point to have considering some visual novels exist where adult content is not the focus, but more so the in-game complementary fan service. Though separating the content from the game as DLC presents its own issues too, as it conflicts with the view most have that DLC with adult content should be free. It's a relatively difficult situation to find an answer to that will please all parties, as the reasons people play games are fundamentally different depending on who you are and why you are interested in the games in the first place. Perhaps it's fair to say that games that focus solely on or revolve around sexual content should have the content as free DLC, or included in the base game with the option to remove said content. Then those that do not place such a heavy focus on adult content could perhaps charge for the DLC as extra, provided there is enough content to justify it and that the price of the DLC is relative to that of the base game, so it reflects fairly on those that wish to play a title for the adult content. Players also expect active developers and publishers to retroactively update the content of their games on Steam if a game heavily featured sexual content but required a patch. This means those that purchase the title new will have the most convenient experience to view the adult content during their gameplay. This, however, should be avoided if the game price was subsidized to sell the DLC elsewhere. In these cases, it will be best to sell the DLC on Steam as justified previously. As general good practice, publishers and developers are now required to describe adult content within their games when selling mature games on Steam. This should be done in an informative manner, but not one that spoils players on content that's more effective or exciting when experienced naturally. For example, some available content descriptors for Kuktinkov Georgie's Boobs Saga can potentially spoil the specifics of various aspects of the game. As an example, scene resembling the act of oral sex performed by a woman on a dwarf, and the remainder of the descriptor spoils what could have been a great comedic aspect of the game. Using generalized descriptors of oral sex and dwarves could have perhaps avoided this while still informing the public that the game features both of these things. As for expectations of players from developers and publishers, the list may not be as expansive, but in essence, they will make life a whole lot less stressful for everyone involved, and perhaps help improve the landscape for adult games on Steam. The first and most important piece of advice I would give players is to be aware of your region's laws and restrictions regarding the sales of adult-themed or pornographic digital content. Even in the first few days of adult titles being on Steam, developers like Darker Studios have been swarmed with complaints that their latest title isn't available in various countries. Whilst it's a shame that these people can't play negligee love stories, it's no fault of Darker Studios as they are only abiding the laws of the countries that they wish to sell in. If players take issue with the restrictions their region has in place, it's up to them and only them to campaign to their local representatives to have these restrictions changed or removed. Until then, expect more conservatively led countries not to have any adult titles for sale on Steam. The only other thing that comes to mind regarding the expectations developers and publishers may have of fans and players is that the ability to publish adult games on Steam is still new practice. It takes time to adjust to new business practices considering the amount of people and investors that may be involved in some productions. That, and some publishers or developers may be waiting to see how the lack of content restrictions play out. There are skeptics that say Steam will soon retract their previous statements regarding the content that games can have on their platform, and some companies simply have too much to lose if they publish their titles on a new platform which on a whim may decide that their title's unsuitable and result in its removal several months down the line. Regardless of how things play out with Steam's current acceptance of adult games onto the platform, I'll be covering any major news regarding the matter. If you want to stay up to date with anime, ecchi, hentai and adult gaming news, be sure to subscribe to Ecchi View and enable notifications to receive alerts when a new video has been uploaded.